All right, it's going on page 93 when we're done. So we're adding that horizontal translation that, remember, we call a phase shift with trig, but it's just your left and right. That's all it is. So here are your little transformations, and we've added that C in there. But make sure you understand that this, notice that B has to be factored out of that. If it's not factored out, then C doesn't work like we think it does. So sometimes it'll be factored out for us. Sometimes there's no need to factor it out, but then sometimes there is. So we just have to pay a little close attention to that. So our phase shifts, again, your horizontal shifts, if we have plus C, which way do we go? Left. Okay, just, I mean, that hasn't changed, right? And then minus C means we go right, C units, whatever it is. Okay. All right, so here it says describe the translations. So we have two translations, two possible translations. We have the phase shift, and then we have the vertical shift. So we're going to list them both, but it's only the horizontal that's the phase shift. Okay. So here, my B is 1, so there's nothing to factor out. So I can just look at this and see that this means I go which way? Left. I'm going to go left pi, and then I'm going to go up 1. Right? When I look at number 2, B is not 1, and it's not factored out, so I need to factor it out. So I need to rewrite this. F of x is equal to the cosine of 2 times x plus what? Pi, because I'm factoring it out, right? I divided both of these by 2. That's where the 2 came from. And then this is plus 1. So for this one, I'm going left pi again and up 1. So these have the same translations, but they looked different originally because I needed to factor that out. So make sure you factor it out. Okay? You're still able to just pull it right out of the function, but you have to factor it first. All right, so then let's look at number 3. Do I need to factor anything out? No. So I'm going to go left pi halves. All right, at first glance, this looks like I'm going left pi halves, but am I? No, even if you can't tell me what we're doing yet, it's not left pi halves because I'm going to have to factor out that 2, right? So this is going to give me f of x is equal to the sine of 2 times x plus what? Pi fourths. Good, because you have to divide by 2, which is the same as multiplying by 1/2. It's pi fourths. We got to be able to handle fractions. So then this one means I'm actually going left pi fourths. You good with that? And you can check yourself. So 2 times x is 2x, 2 times pi is 2 pi. 2 times x is 2x, 2 times pi fourths is pi halves. We're good? Do I need to factor on number 5? Yes. So this is going to give me f of x is equal to the sine of 1/2 times x minus what? Well, to factor out, I would have to divide. So basically, I divided this by 1/2. That's how I got x. If I'm going to divide this by 1/2, that means I multiply by the reciprocal, and that gives me 4 pi. Which means I go to the right 4 pi. And then I need to factor on number 6, right? So f of x is equal to the cosine of 3 times x minus what? Pi thirds. Pi thirds, close, close, minus 2. So this means I'm going to the right pi thirds. I'm going down 2. Any questions about that? We good? Okay. So let's graph some of these. So we're going to fill all this stuff in over on the right first, but first we want to look at this and see if we need to factor. Do I need to factor anything in number 5? No. Okay. So my amplitude, what's the amplitude here? 1. What's the frequency? Also 1, which means the period is what? 2 pi. Good. Do I have a phase shift? Yes. Which way am I going? Left. Pi halves, right? And my midline is at y equals 0. Okay, so just like on the other ones, this is sine, so I'm going to draw my little parent function here, and then I'm going to put in my midline. Okay. So my first anchor point is here, so that's where I'm going to start at my new 0, 0, which is actually still my old 0, 0. And amplitude, and so I'm not going to stretch, I'm not going to, the period's the same, everything, but I do go to the left pi halves. So from here, I move to the left pi halves, there's my first point. Okay. The end of the period without the phase shift is 2 pi. So I put my pencil on 2 pi, and then I move to the left pi halves. So now I have the beginning and the end. And how I do the rest, it just depends on what you find easier on, and it may change graph to graph. I can figure out where my middle point is and then move it to the left, or I can just do half, half, half by counting. Sometimes one's easier than the other. So I could count and find the middle, because I know that this is right in the middle. Or I know that if I was at 2 pi, the middle really would be at pi before I move, and so I can go here and then move to the left pi halves. On this one, I think that's easier than counting all those little lines, because the lines are kind of little, right? Then I'm doing half again. So halfway between these two, from the midline, I go up whatever the amplitude is. So halfway between these two is right there. That's a little easier to see, right? Then I go up 1. Then halfway between these two, I go down 1. And there are my 5 anchor points. Okay, we good? And then we just repeat. Okay. It looks like this. What questions you got? We good? Because if you graphed the other ones, this isn't that big of a deal. We're just moving to the left, and we're also going to do some reflections today. All right, number 6, do I need a factor? Yes. All right, so it's going to give me f of x is equal to the cosine of 2/3 times x minus what? Close. Pi. Good. It's 1 pi, so it's pi. Okay. So my amplitude here is? Amplitude is 1. Yeah, you're good. You're ahead of me. All right, frequency is 2/3. Yeah, you're good. All right, so then what's the period? Three pi, because it would be 6 pi over 2, which is 3 pi. Phase shift, I'm going to the right, how much? Pi, because after I factored out, right? Midline, y equals 0. So this is cosine. Here's my parent function. Here's my midline. So I start from the midline on the y-axis up whatever the amplitude is. That's where I start. So I'm on the y-axis up 1, but then I'm supposed to go to the right pi. So there's my first point. Okay. The end of the period on before I shift is 3 pi, and I'd have the same y value. So I'd be out here at 3 pi, which may not be a problem, except I go to the right even further. Like if my shift was to the left, I may end up back on my graph, but I go to the right even further, can't do that. Halfway between these two would be at 3 pi halves, which is right here, but I go to the right pi and I'm off my graph again. If this is 3 pi halves before I shift, what's this? What's half of 3 pi halves? 3 pi fourths. So and that's a 0 on the midline, so here's 3 pi fourths, and then when I move to the right pi, it gets me a point right here. Okay? So I can only put 2 of my 5 anchor points on there. Is that enough? If we had no clue what this looked like, it would not be enough. But we know what it looks like, right? We know this is supposed to come down and then back up. So it comes like this, and everything is spaced out evenly. So if I'm coming up this way, then I skip 2 lines and then I'm here. Then I skip 2 lines and I'm back down here. Skip 2 up here, skip 2 down here. Okay, so really, you only have to have 2 if you understand how the graph works, and then there's your curve. What questions you got? Mm-hmm. Did I do it wrong? What did I do? One side is a lot longer. What did I do? I skipped 2. Oh, I forgot my 0 here. Dang it. That's what I did. I skipped 2 just fine, but then I didn't do the thank you. Okay. So then when maybe I should erase more of that. Thank you. I thought it just looked bad because I didn't do it. Okay, so I skipped 2, and then I'm at 0, and then I skipped 2, and I'm up here. Yeah. Thank you. That looks way better. It's still a little too straight right there, but it's fine. Maybe I should have glanced down at my paper. This is why I have this in front of me. We all good then? Once I fixed my mistake? Okay. Good deal. Let's look at the next one. Do I need to factor here? No. Okay, so what's my amplitude? 2. Is it 2 or negative 2? 2. Okay. What's my frequency? 1. So the period is 2 pi. Do I have a phase shift? No. And my midline is y equals negative 3. Okay, so then this is sine. So here's my parent function, and here is my midline. And then I have something extra here that I haven't had, which made us want to say negative 2. I have this negative, which means it's a reflection. Is that going to be a reflection in x or y? Does it affect x or y? Do we multiply the negative before we take the sign? No. So it doesn't affect x. It affects y, which means it's a reflection in x. Okay? Remember that? If it affects y, it's a reflection in x. If it affects x, it's a reflection in y. So we're reflecting in the x-axis here. So if I'm here at a 0, 0, that doesn't affect it anyway, right? So my midline 0, 0 is right here. The only thing that would affect that is a translation left or right, which I don't have. So there's my first point. Then I go to the end of the period. The end of the period is 2 pi. That's also a midline 0. The only thing that would affect that is a shift left or right, which I don't have. Then the middle is right here at pi. So those 3 are the same regardless of whether or not I have a reflection, right? So normally we go halfway between these 2 and go up whatever the amplitude is. But because of this negative, I'm going to go halfway between these 2 and go down the amplitude, which is 2. And then halfway between these 2, I would go down, but there's a reflection, so I go up. And there are my 5 anchor points. Okay. We good on that? What questions you got? All right, so then I just repeat that. Repeat the pattern over here. And here we go. Any questions at all? Good deal. All right, on number 8, do I need to factor? No, right? Because I'll just need to factor out if I had something that was with the b there. So what's the amplitude? 3. What's the frequency? 2. So the period is pi. Good. Do I have a phase shift? No. And my midline is y equals 1. All right, so this is cosine. Sketch my parent function here. I have this negative again that I got to pay attention to. And here is my midline. Okay. So I'm not shifting left or right, which means I am starting on the y-axis. Normally it's from the midline. I go up whatever the amplitude is, but because of that negative, I'm going to start at the midline and go down the amplitude, which is 3. And I'm right here. The end of the period has the same y value. So the end of the period is at pi. There's my same y value. Halfway between the two, I'm on the other side of the midline, whatever the amplitude is. So this time I go up 3 from the midline. Then halfway between those are zeros on the midline, which are right here. What questions do you have? We good? Any questions? All right, so then we just repeat it. What questions do you have? Okie dokie. So let's look at number 9. Do I need to factor in number 9? Yes. So I'm going to have f of x is equal to negative 3 times the sine of 2 times x plus what? Pi halves minus 2. Everybody good with where all that came from? All right, so what's my amplitude? 3. My frequency is 2, so the period is pi. My phase shift makes me go left, pi halves, and the midline y equals negative 2. Okay. So this is sine. Here's my parent function. Here's my midline. Oops. Do that a little bit better. It's my midline. Okay. So normally I start at a midline 0, 0. But I got a couple of things that can affect, or I have one thing that can affect that. That's my phase shift, but I also have this negative I have to pay attention to. Since it's a reflection in the x-axis, when I'm on the midline, it doesn't affect that. So I start here, but then I have to move to the left pi halves. So this is my first point. Then I go to the end of the period, which is at pi, but then I move to the left pi halves. Everybody okay with all that? Then halfway between the two, I have another midline 0. That's right here. Halfway between the first 2 points, I would go up whatever the amplitude is, but this is negative, so instead I'm going to go down the amplitude. And then between the second 2, I would go down, but there's a reflection, so I go up 3, and I'm right here. Everybody good so far? So then we just repeat. And alternate up, down, up, down. So if you look at this graph as is, do you think we could write an equation that makes it a sine function that doesn't have a translation and doesn't have a reflection, and we could get the same graph? Because that's what it looks like it happens, right? Because I had somebody last period say, okay, wait, why is this part going up and not down? There's a reflection. So I said, well, because these are our 5 anchor points, and so the first section actually does go down, but since it was translated, I mean, so there's an infinite amount of equations we could write for that function, because I could translate it even more and, you know, do different things with it. I could write all kinds of things for it. We good with that then? Okay, so don't let that play tricks with your mind like, wait, I thought I was supposed to reflect, and then go back and second guess yourself. Like, we did reflect, we did translate. It just so happens that it looks like we didn't do either one of those things. Okay, we good? All right. Let's look at number 10 then. Do I need to factor? Yes. Okay, so go ahead and factor this. Let you think through it. So I would end up with x plus what? 2 pi. Good. And if you second guess yourself on that, always check yourself. 1/2 times 2 pi is pi. Okay? All right, so what's my amplitude here? 2. Frequency? 1/2. Period? Remember, it's 2 pi divided by the frequency, which means we multiply by 2 over 1, so that makes it 4 pi. Okay. Phase shift, we go to the left, 2 pi. Midline, y equals 1. Okay, so this is a cosine, and here's my midline. So no reflection here. I normally start on the y-axis up from the amplitude, so that's where I'm going to start, but then I have a phase shift of 2 pi. So I'm on the y-axis from the midline, I go up 2, but then I move to the left 2 pi. I'm right here. The end of my period is at 4 pi, that's before a phase shift, and it has the same y value, so 4 pi is way off my graph. But I'm going to shift to the left 2 pi, so where does that end me up? At 2 pi. So I actually can get the end of the period. Halfway between the two, go down from the midline. So from here, we go down 2. And then half and half again, which puts me at negative pi and pi. What questions we got? We good? Get the hang of it? All right, do I need to factor on number 11? Yes. All right, go ahead and factor. So this is going to be x minus what? Pi fourths. Very good. All right, so my amplitude is 3. Frequency is 2. Period is pi. Phase shift is, right, pi fourths. Good. And then midline, y equals 2. All right. This is cosine, so here's my little graph. And I'm up here at 2. And don't forget your negative. So you go ahead and get your 5 anchor points on there. I'm going to give you a minute, then I'll put mine up there, and then you can check yourself with me before you complete everything. And if I need to talk you through it, I can, but I want you to try and think through what you're doing. So don't just copy mine down, but once you think you have your anchor points, check yourself with me, and then if you're good, you can go ahead and complete the graph. I'm going to leave it at this stage, though, that way, if you're looking up and down, you're not confused about what to do. Okay?